Alright. That was Cummy Sinners, and this is RC Apologist, your host for the first ever episode of the year, of the new year of 2020, Theological Discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all for tuning in. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you as usual. And of course, we can't forget our other guest on here, or our co-host, should I say, not guest, our co-host. Y'all so far have had him only on here for just a few episodes recently, but you are already starting to love him and find him interesting. So let's go ahead and just get him out with his, usual essence that's about him. Ave, how are you doing, my good friend?
Hey everyone, yes, it's your favorite humble, handsome orange doggo, Avera, and welcome to the new year. I'm super excited.
Alright, we all are excited, I'm sure. And in fact, speaking of excited, before we get into the show, because we are going to preface that a bit, which by the way, if you can hear the music, the little shaking thing, I got myself my drink to keep me focused and awake while we do this show today. And let me know if we're having any issues in the during the streaming, if y'all are watching in the live chat. But one of the things that I wanted to point it out, and I'm gonna illustrate what's on the screen, because I know Abe can't see what's going on my particular side of the screen, but he has sent me these pics, so he at least knows what we're dealing with. So, Abe, you went to a bash to celebrate the new year. Am I correct?
I did, yes. It was called New Year's Furry Ball, or NYFB.
Ooh.
It was in Delaware, and about 540 people showed up.
That's a lot of people,
Yeah. Oh yeah, hundreds of fursuiters. It was great.
So we're gonna show a picture of that, and we're gonna give a little game to some of the people. So first of all, and as I put this up, I'm gonna test and see how things are going on my end with trying to hear the audio, or see if there's a streaming issue. I don't think there should be. Let me just listen to that. Okay, there we go. We should be fine. All right, but that being said, I don't know if anyone can find our boy, but Ave is somewhere on that screen. Because it's gonna be hard for me to keep up with what you people are looking at live. For some reason, my thing is getting all off and easy. Oh well, either way, just if y'all have a question or a comment, you have the comment for the reason. Blah 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 blah. Anyways, we'll just have to go by faith that we're in tune with everything. Anyways, that being said, so yeah, he's somewhat in the middle to the right. Is where I would say is a good place to spot him. He's a candy corn doggo, so Ave is not too hard to spot. Now, that being said, there is also two other pictures, and I'm going to show the two of them side by side, where there's one where he's by a Christmas tree. It's just him being Ave. And then we got another one where it shows Ave with the ability to show that if you use black light, what you find is a neon orange.
Yeah, my fur is UV reactive, so I glow like the sun. It's wonderful.
I'll say, yeah. I mean, anytime someone can glow like the sun, especially in orange, and go from the orange that you see from Donald Trump's crazy skin tans to like something you'd expect in like one of them crazy neon anime things, like that would be an interesting
It's huge. Orange doggo bad.
Woo, man, I just had this first sip of the drink today, and it's woo. There's a reason I like it. So those of you that don't know, it's G Fuel, and I got the watermelon mint flavor called Dub Melon Mint. And of course I gotta constantly shake it to make sure that there is no powdery substance in there. But yeah, it's a good flavor. It's not something you expect to work, but it works. So yeah. Okay, so we're ready to get on to what we're discussing, and to make sure that we are on board with what we are talking about, just keep in mind we got it up there where it says, reacting to Furry Skeptic. So there's an individual who goes by the name of Furry Skeptic. I hope she is watching. Let me just go ahead and message her just in case, unless she has got it. Let me because she was at least from what it seemed, excited whenever
so you did talk to her about this beforehand.
Like, I mentioned I was gonna do it, and she was definitely sharing that out, and even telling people, keep an eye out for that. That this is gonna happen.
Okay, very interesting.
So I'm gonna. Alright, so the message is sent. So just in case they want to do because I want to make sure that there's at least some time to respond if there is anything we misunderstand or anything like that. But I got even some of the books on hand that I think will be useful in preparation for this discussion. But that being said, let's go to the video. And this video is called Why Worship. By the way, welcome True Gamer 69, Reformed Kid, and Slam RN. Thank y'all for tuning in. Give the video a like, and be sure to give the video a share. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and hit the bell notification if you're into that sort of stuff. So yeah, be sure to help us out here with the channel and help us out with the stream. Get more people involved and interacted in a theological discussion, hence the name of the show. That being said, so the background, of course, is, like I said, is called Why Worship. It's a video that came out December 29th with the description: the concept of worship is pretty much ambiguous when it comes to religion, but why? Let's explore the idea of worship and why anyone would want to do it. Now, of course, as religion, it means it's going to be kind of vaguely about the other different gods and religions that are out there. But we're going to particularly respond to this one from the perspective and the worldview of the Christian religion. And by the way, just so y'all know who we're responding to, while pulling up the picture there, and I'm going to send the image to Ave. Let me see here.
I know who we're talking about.
Oh, you've seen him before? Oh wait, no, I sent you the video. Why am I?
Of course you did, silly. I'm prepared. However, I would love to react to it again because I only saw it once, and I'm sure our commentary will be most entertaining.
Well, it's not necessarily that we need to be entertaining on the whole thing. It's also the fact that we need to be, making sure we give a sort of
constructive criticism. Yes, I also do have a lot to say about this video, and not necessarily in a joking manner, of course.
Right. I think that's the thing. We need to make sure we take this particular thing seriously. Yes. So let's go ahead and get to the video, and we're gonna have to pause and skip one portion of it because it plays a Doctor Who clip, and I am not going to get this channel censored because of the Doctor. Sorry, but I don't want to have like any kind of problems or issues of thing going on there. Also, there's still some sick in there.
Big bad YouTube cracking down.
Oh yeah. Get one last sip of that watermelon in before we go in for the video. Want to make sure my throat is hydrated. I don't want to go during the middle of it. Here we go. So 3, 2, turn that volume up, and let me make sure our audio is good because we're only playing the audio of it. And go.
Hello everyone. Today I would like to talk about worship. I was thinking about it, and even if someone were to prove a God's existence, I I can't think of any circumstance where I would willingly worship it.
So there's the Doctor Who clip. But right there we have the instance where she says that even if a god were to exist, wouldn't be able to think of a reason or a justification for worshipping such a being. So that's already sort of the thing we're gonna have to keep in mind in what we're dealing with the particular person. So
that's essentially her premise right now. So she's saying if a
For the
god
moment,
existed,
yes.
she doesn't understand why it would be worshipped. That's what she's basically going to start out as.
right. So let's continue and see where we get from here.
But my life as a believer was spent as a deist, or just a vague form of Christianity, with a God that I created out of my own
Wait,
morality.
hold up. I think I missed something there. Hold up.
While I was raised Catholic, most of my life as a believer was spent.
So it says, so there was a thing where some of the Doctor Who and the other thing was mingled in there, but if you didn't catch that, she said that some of her life raised was as a Catholic, and then, of course, as we're going to get into, she then became a deist.
As a deist, or just a vague form of Christianity, with a God that I created out of my own morality. That being that I had created to believe in didn't require worship. While I went to church, it was to learn lessons about life and to feel connected with other people. It never had the intent of groveling to another being. I feel like if I had thought about what I was doing as worship, I would have stopped much sooner. I was always taught that God was like a father figure, and that he has unconditional love for us. A person who loves...
So let me stop right there on that particular thing, because that is something that I honestly wish some Christians would stop saying, is that there is the teaching and idea of unconditional loving, and when you look this up, and what people try to usually mean by that is usually promoted by some of the people such as the Joel Osteens, the T.D. Jakes, and all these other people, and then some of the pastors that pretty much I've seen do this whole thing where they quote John 3:16 and just stop halfway, and they don't even bother to finish the rest of it.
Well, I would like to address one of her contradictions. Actually, she just said that she referred to worship as essentially groveling. I mean, she literally said that, and then right afterwards, she said that God is supposed to be a father figure. That's what she was taught. So
Yeah.
you don't grovel towards your parents; you respect and love them.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what you should be
Right.
doing?
Right, exactly. And I would agree there on that aspect, but also at the same time to keep in mind, well, with that, then there's the issue of one of the other teachings that can be harmful is the idea of trying to say and claim something that the Bible doesn't, that God is a unconditional loving person. If we want to say unconditional loving, then the only thing that we can even come close to that is that it was be unconditional toward the believers. The Bible does state clearly in several places where God hates certain individuals. The Bible does indicate that God does show different forms of graces towards the believers versus the unbelievers.
Right, and that's something I'm going to get into a little bit later, because I do have some interesting examples to bring up.
Yeah, and so keep in mind that as we get into this, that what we're going to have to be sure to focus on is being a biblical example, showing a biblical example of some of these things that are going on, and not just simply what we were taught in our traditions, because there was a lot of things I was taught in traditions in my background growing up that I had later then had to abandon after digging more research into Christianity, digging more research into the Bible, and research even into historical theology, because that's a field of study where you're looking at the different aspects of how many people would affirm this, or even when certain doctrines start to popularly get involved and utilized during a certain period of time. So that's one thing I think that needs to be kept in mind as we go into this video. But anyways, let's hear what she has to say. I made sure hopefully we're back on track with where we placed it and after we paused it.
A person who loves you doesn't demand or expect worship, and a child should never, ever be told that they have to revere a parent. I don't want to equate worship with respect either, because those are two different things. Respect is earned, and it can be equal. Two people who love each other should also respect each other as equals. To worship someone, you would be putting them above you, as greater than you.
Right, and there's the other thing at
Yes.
least. So, in fact, I have before us two Christian dictionaries. We have the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary, and it's the revised and expanded edition. So it's the one that's really up to date, and I like it because Holman makes usually some good Bibles, especially being the one that was responsible for the Holman Christian Standard Bible translation that I utilize for my reading. And the scholars they even have on this particular dictionary are pretty good and solid. Like they even had James White on here. They had Daniel B. Wallace, I think, is on here. So they have like several people. So there's bound to be something on worship. And I was right. That says actually has one page and a half of a definition on worship. So let's see here with what we can find. The term, or worship, is a term used to refer to the act or action as associated with attributing honor, reverence, or worth to that which is considered to be divine by religious adherents. Christian worship is often defined as the ascription of worth or honor to the triune God. Worship is more fully understood as an interrelation between divine action and human response. Worship is the human response to the self-revelation of the triune God. This includes divine initiation, in which God reveals himself, his purposes, and his will. Number two, a spiritual and personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ on the part of the worshiper. And number three, a response by the worshiper of adoration, humility, submission, and obedience to God. Worship may be understood in either a broad or a narrow context. In a broad sense, worship is seen as a way of life. Romans chapter 12, verse 1. We're gonna go over each of these. That way we're not just spitting passages and it's like, we'll let you do the rest of the homework. Romans 12:1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. So,
well, what she's saying is that I believe she has a problem with the idea of worship in general. She's saying that, we should be treated as equals, and that you're placing God above you. Now, I don't know about you, RCA, but I'm not an omniscient being that created the universe. So, yes, I will say that God is above me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just how it is.
Yes, and I would agree with that.
I don't have a problem with acknowledging that fact.
Yeah, and I agree there. And by the way, there's someone in the chat that's trying to get me to debate Jay Dyer again, and says he's saying, debate Jay Dyer again, you Calvinist furry. And I'm like, he's blocked me and refuses to debate me. He's the one who rage quit during a debate. He's the one that said, he didn't want to debate again, and that he's blocked me from Twitter and from emailing him. So yeah, if you want to try to do this whole Jay Dyer thing, save it for a time where you can try to initiate and convince him to unblock me from his social media. Anyways, so continuing on with the definition, remember what we cited as the Romans 12:1, that is in that passage there. It says, in this context, all of life is viewed as an act of worship or service before God, which is then, why did I take the thing down if we're going to use it again? All right, so it says all of life then is used as it. So 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 31 gives us another indication of this, which says, whether therefore ye eat or drink or whatsoever ye do all to the glory of God. So there could be considered an act of worship. And then Colossians chapter 3 verse 17, we go over to here, Colossians chapter 3 verse 17. And whatsoever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and to the Father by him. So it seems definitely here much more than just simply some reverence or respect kind of aspect. It's like an honoring kind of system where you're doing things in the name of, and not just in like general things, but like pretty much almost every aspect. Like me going to anime conventions, I could use that and do that in the name of the Lord when I have certain chances to witness to people, show the good fruits of the Spirit there. Like we ended up handing out $80 worth of McDonald's to random people there because we wanted to, do some good, and I felt that that could be something that would be helpful, is to give back to a community that's helped me out in certain times. And then just going around and talking to people with the Ask RC Apologist panel that was there. So there was several things I could do there. That was just 3 I could think of off the top of my head to give God the glory and the honor at an anime convention. I'm sure same things can be thought about for furry conventions. Same thing could be thought about when someone is doing rock and roll music. I'm sure the same thing could be done when someone is going around playing the guitar in the streets. All kinds of things.
But what she's saying is she has a problem with the idea of placing a deity greater than oneself and feeling the need to adore it. That's really what she's getting at here.
Right.
And you have to realize that I believe she's coming from a perspective that she thinks that equality is key, is core to everything. God is not on our level. Like,
right.
In my perspective, he's not.
Right. So that's only part of the definition I'll read there, but I think that one gives a good one there. And then I have here the Evangelical Dictionary of Theology, but it's only the 2nd edition. I know there's a more recent edition that came out, but I'm using this particular one from Walter A. Elwell. Is going to look in the W section. But again, the reason why I name these is so in case y'all find a way to utilize these, y'all can then look them up for yourselves and get that. By the way, if I pause at times, it's because these headphones that I got are starting to feel a little weird. These new headphones, they are one of them noise canceling, and it feels weird not being able to hear certain things, and because it's also raining outside my house, and I've got neighbors, so I don't know what's what. Be one thing where like I'm just enjoying these noise canceling headphones, and then boom, someone broke into my house. You know what I'm saying? That'd be one heck of a day. All right. And this is there it is, worship. Our English word means worship, denoting the worthiness of an individual to receive special honor in accordance with that worth. The principal biblical terms, the Hebrew saha and the Greek proskenio, emphasize the act of prostration, the doing of obeisance. I want to say that's a typo, but I could be wrong. This could be a word I've never heard of. This may be done out of regard for the dignity of personality and influenced somewhat by custom, Genesis 18:2, or maybe based on family relationship, Genesis 49:8, or on station in life, 1 Kings 1:31. On a higher plane, the same terms are used of divine honors rendered to a deity, rather to the gods of the nation, Exodus 25, or to the one true and living God who reveals himself in Scripture and in his Son, Exodus 24:1. The tutelage of Israel in the wilderness laid great stress on the sinfulness of idolatrous worship and its dire consequences, Deuteronomy 8:19. I want to keep this in mind, to definitely keep what I just read there in mind when we go further, because this is going to play an important role here. No injury to God compares with the denial of his uniqueness and the transfer to another of the recognition due to him. In this light must be understood his references to himself as a jealous God. Exodus 20 verse 5. Wait, what was that you say, RC? It's like, well, yeah, that's right. A lot of people don't like it, and it's one of those unpopular Bible doctrines. God is a jealous God. Exodus chapter 20 verse 5. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. I want to keep it.
Well, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. She does delve into this a little bit.
True, but that was from the definition that is used. But I also just reading this, I just realized what this reminds me of. The Yandere episode we did. Or I think that was us. Like, trying to Hold on. Let me try something.
All right.
Oh, it's not. I realized what it was. That the sound is off. It's if I scratch the earphones or like the things or whatever, like it is really loud. So that's what that is all about. But yeah, like I think yeah. Okay, restart. So yeah, like it did remind me of that whole incident there with that passage because it's, you know, the jealous God, and we hear it in the Yandere voice. But yeah, like you said, where that's one of the things that's gonna get to. But we need to keep in mind again that there is a broad and a narrow context of having to define it, and I think ultimately the best way to define the term worship is more in a sense, not so much as a respect of the individual, but it's more so like an honoring that you are doing in that you dedicate yourselves to that person, your life.
Well, yes, adoration and doing good works in their name.
Yes.
Now, I guess you could make the comparison between, families. Sons and daughters want to please their parents by, being respectful, by doing, what they say, being obedient, and, just living a good life. But what my problem is with this Furry Skeptic individual is that she's saying that she's comparing it to, like, groveling and why should I do this? And so it seems like she's coming from, I don't know, like, kind of a very pessimistic point of view.
Well, I mean, we'll see. So let's get into the video and see what's going to be said.
Worse than equating worship with respect are those who conflate worship with a general appreciation for something. When people say that atheists worship science, or that people worship their phones or money or that sort of thing, those things are not the same. I appreciate science and I use my phone and computer quite a bit, but I do not bow to them. I'll gladly trade my phone in for a new one each year and buy a new computer when this one breaks. Enjoying something is not worship. This is a ridiculous claim, so please don't compare these things. It also makes the worship to your God rather pointless if it can be put on the same level as my using my phone, don't you think?
So
that's what she's saying. That's not
right.
On the same level at all.
Right. So, and I would agree that, just because something is respected or adored and liked doesn't mean it's worship. And I wouldn't say that there's some Christians that do try to go that route, but there are ways where you can take an inanimate object or a person or a concept and it becomes
it could become worship, and not
right.
in the biblical, not in the definitions that you ascribed.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's not unfair to say that people have extreme anxiety when their phone battery starts to get very low, or people will literally kill each other for money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That happens.
Right. And
so,
but here's another one though. And this one can sort of be viewed as a way where it's used too much in your life. A sort of philosophy, if you will, though they won't really say it is the issue of scientism, I think is what I've heard the term being used as. And what's usually meant by that is that it is the concept where all things can be determined and explained by science, and I'm talking all things. So in other words, so here's where it would be a good way to explain it. Scientism is the promotion of science as the best or only objective means by which society should determine normative and epistemological values. The term scientism is generally used critically, implying a cosmetic application of science in unwarranted situations considered not amenable to application of the scientific method or similar scientific standards. So keep in mind, the whole thing is about pretty much that the term was not used by the people who follow this kind of thinking, but rather that it is used as a critical term by its opponents. And
well, I really don't see the difference between scientism and theology.
right, because here's the thing. What scientism does is essentially they say that, for example, on the issue of moral values, how can we know something is morally right or wrong? Some people that don't subscribe to this and come from an atheistic perspective will say that the issue is that morality is subjective and is determined by, a collective society. But then you can have someone that comes in along the way from the science perspective and doesn't hold to that. But as a scientific person, the scientism's position will be that, we can use the scientific method to examine and conclude an objective sort of means for this and know why this is wrong. Or there's even books that are called the scientific evidence that shows no God exists, or the scientific evidence for this and that's all we need. All we need is the material things. And that even when you try to bring in philosophy, they'll say, like Stephen Hawking said, that philosophy is dead. And when they start with that philosophy is dead, then, it's basically trying to say you can't make any philosophical reasoning or looking into, even though if you ask them, why is science important, they start getting into philosophy.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. That's where it derails. I was referring to more or less like the broader perspective of just physics in general. Any kind of sciences. I mean, who created the laws of physics? Mm-hmm. I'm just saying. But I'd like to get more into what she's saying about materialistic items. Right. So, her definition of worship does appear to be more of the general understanding, more analogous, if anything.
Yeah. So, but keep in mind, what she has stated so far has been what she's trying to define worship as what it's not so far. Like, she's trying to explain what it's not before she goes into the criticism of what worship is and where she has a problem.
She does have a general idea, which I understand where she's coming from, but it's not necessarily correct in my opinion.
Okay.
Or according to the definition of what it actually is. But,
right. Right. All right. So we've gone through the thing that. Oh, so I'm just gonna read this because it was mentioned here. Woo. Recommend the Classic Bible Dictionary from Sovereign Grace Publications books. I think that's what the SGB or SGP stands for. It's completely reformed and think you'd like it. I have to look in it and be careful, because if I'm not mistaken, Sovereign Grace Publications, or if it's publications or publishing, has made some if I'm not mistaken, it's like a hyper or a primitive Baptist kind of thing. So there's sometimes I have to be careful with some of the primitive Baptist works if they go to what's the word, because I actually have some of those books that's from that particular publication, and the way that they then try to engage in apologetics and their thing. There was even one of the books that basically tried to justify not evangelizing as a whole, that you have to kind of find some specific person. The book was Be Ready to Answer from Michael L. Gowan's, was it? And it was an early copy, not the revised and updated edition that's up on the store today. But yeah. So anyways, I don't know. I might look into that. I'll probably consider getting it. That being said, let's play the video. Here we go.
So now that we've talked about what worship isn't, let's talk about what it is. and why anyone would want to do it. For the sake of argument, let's say that God created the universe, and therefore he created you. This doesn't inherently require you to give him anything in return, let alone your entire life.
Good point.
This doesn't require you to follow his rules either. God doesn't own you. His giving you life doesn't make you his slave. When Adam and Eve were given life, it was then their life to do with as they pleased. He had no right to order them not to eat of the tree, especially if they were adults with free will.
Okay,
Wow.
so
So you think if God gave you life, you wouldn't be just a tad bit thankful?
right,
Just a little
I mean,
bit.
I mean, especially since the whole thing is, like I told this one atheist while I was over in Little Rock, Arkansas, because if there's evil and all this stuff, why did God create it in the first place? I'm like, it's a good question.
Oh,
for
no,
example,
no.
because I said that's a good question. Because if he wanted to, God could have just not made us and made the universe, and it just remained empty and void and nothing. But he chose to do so. I feel like there is some interesting way to look at it.
She also used the word slave, though. Like, no, we're not enslaved to God. That's not.
Well,
That's
I
not
think
what's
what she's
going on
referring
here.
to is the passage where it does actually use that terminology, but in a sense, not literally, but metaphorically,
I think
if you
she's
will.
taking it literally, though.
With because it says in the Bible that if you are a person that is not repentant and born again in the believer, it is sorry about that. I see someone Luna lustered us in the chat. I'm gonna check the trending on Twitter just to check that out real quick, be sure. But also I want to just, while I have the train of thought on me, great. What was I just saying?
It just seems like she's coming at this from a very
Oh yeah.
pessimistic
The
you know?
So you have the Bible passages where it talks about that we are slaves of sin.
Right, but not slaves to God, like we are
But
his
we are
literal servants.
But we are slaves.
Like-
But we are slaves to Christ, in the sense where it says that if we look at it, like
the way she's saying it, I'm just saying
hold on. Let me. So like slave of Christ, but it's in the way that it's simply that we are, as we see in the model of the New Testament life, because if you look at how the Apostle Paul viewed himself as a slave of Christ and the way that he had his background from there, and then if you go and look up the other New Testament writings where it shows the slaves of Christ, that is the 12 apostles, and the writings that we have from them in the New Testament, and especially in the Acts, then we'll see what this kind of looks like. It doesn't look like sort of slave thing that's going on where it's like master obeys this a particular master and all that kind of stuff. Like, you don't see that. What you see so more is like a sort of metaphorical way that in hindsight can actually look more as a servant to Christ. You are a slave.
Precisely.
You are a slave in the sense that you are bound to Christ, but it's not a harmful thing. Because here's the other thing to consider is and this is why it was interesting with the context. At that time, yes, there was slavery going on that was very bad, where it was like, if you were a slave to this particular person, you had to be, very obedient to this, because they were strict Roman people, and like you disagreed on anything, even privately, and they found out, and it was problematic. But in this, it talks about the freedom, then the liberty that you have in as when being a slave of Christ, versus being limited in a similar manner like you are with the Romans soldiers, or with the Romans in general, or anyone that owned you in that time during the slave thing, much in the similar way that you are a slave to sin. But when you are a slave
now,
to
if
Christ,
there
there is liberty.
If there was another word for that, like if there was another word for slave of Christ or servant and whatnot, yeah, that would make more sense. So, you know, you have to use your own interpretation of this. It's not what people think. You know, like they're using this term like as if it's a negative thing, as if like, oh well, they're indentured and they have to do this, otherwise, like, you know what I mean? Like they're trying to reference a negative historical aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't understand, you know, the freedom and the overall goodness of worship itself, and just understanding.
Yeah.
I forgot where I was going with that, but like, you know what I mean. It's not the same thing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, worshiping God is not being a slave to him. Like, that's not what it actually means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's doing good works on your own free will, essentially.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, let's get more into the video. Also, I'm wondering what it is that I'm looking for that's trending on Twitter, because there's only one thing I can think of that I see right now. It says Coachella's going on, and I see Hatsune Miku is gonna be there.
Okay.
But I don't know what's, because like it's varying from some of these things. Some of these things I can't even pronounce. So, but we'll see what's going on. But anyways, let's get back to the world. Whoa, you know what? I just now noticed that. What in the world?
What?
There is a trending on there called World War III.
Oh boy.
That's good. Yeah, it's talking about like the Guardian or something like that. It says what is it? Iran General Qasem Soleimani killed in Baghdad drone strike ordered by Trump. So I guess they're, the Iranian general in Baghdad ended up getting caught in a drone strike that was done, and apparently people are speculating from some of the reaction that is going on over there that this is possibly going to be the result of World War III. We'll see what happens when it gets there, though. But I think, if it becomes World War III, I'm just gonna make sure to dodge the draft if that happens and comes about. So we'll see what goes on when it happens. But anyways, we're gonna try to get back to the video. And someone is Master Porky Minch in the chat says, "Oh my pork." I don't get what's up with people and pork these days. I mean, if it's not on bacon, man, it's not for me, my friend. I'm sorry. It's just stupid. Not, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Anyways, let's get back into it.
It is not kind nor loving for a God to demand love from you, and he does demand it. You shall have no gods before me. It's a direct order. That's not how people talk who love you.
So here's the thing. So let's focus on this aspect here with the issue that the context in which that is given isn't an issue of a law. God, because here's the thing. People, like she said, God is like a father and that is loving, and thinks that that's the only thing that God is limited and boiled down to, but it is not. The issue is that if you read, God is a judge. God is all just. He is more than just simply a father figure for people. And if he is a father figure, he's only a father figure to those who are the believers. He is not a father figure to those who are non-believers. He is someone who is then at that point, much to the believers in a similar fashion, a judge. He is the person who controls and sustains the entire universe as a creator. He is someone that is a sustainer. He is more than just simply that of a loving parent to his children, to the believers in Christ.
Right. And wouldn't it make sense that he would demand that there are no other gods besides him, because he's literally the creator, the omniscient, omnipotent creator being of the universe? You know,
Yeah.
wouldn't that make a lot of sense?
Especially
So
in
what's
light
the
of when
problem
that,
here?
especially in light of when that verse is given, you have the different people that are going around that are, for example, within particularly Canaanite religions, you had children sacrifices that were being done. You had, especially within the context of the children sacrifices being done, you had little boys or men dressed up in feminine clothing trying to act, and these were the I forget what the particular Hebrew word is called, but they're male shrine temple prostitutes that would go out and entice other men to come into their place of worship, where they would then offer a baby onto the to the fire of Moloch or whatever the deity was that was worshipped, and as the baby is set on fire and the baby is burning slowly, these people decide to all of a sudden have an orgy, and so basically that would
Oh my God! Okay.
Yeah.
Stop right there. Whoa.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah. So when God commands, there are no other gods aside from me. Yeah, I would rather not get involved in some evil rituals where you're killing children and raping people. That's disgusting. Like, no. Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. Like, if God demands that he's the only one you should worship, then you know what? That's okay by me.
And so it's not just simply that whole thing that consider. It's the issue again is that it's more than just simply idea of God being something that's love, because again we talked about how that unconditional thing is not too much true. There's a limitation in there, but we also have the issue that God is a judge, and if as a judge he makes the declaration that, you know, something is wrong, then that is what, and that he's not just a judge but he's a lawgiver, and he has this declaration of something is wrong and commands you not to do it. It's not the issue of love per se in the sense of trying to be in like a parent, but it's the issue of trying to let you know that this is the law, don't do it, much in the same way that if a dad was also a lawgiver, a lawmaker, and made this bill that, or made this, or established this particular law to happen, and says, you know, son, don't go and do this law. Does that mean that he has some kind of less love for the son? No, it's simply pointing out that his job is going to be taken into consideration as his status as a lawgiver, a lawmaker, as well as partially having that issue with intertangling them with him being a parent. So again, being a parent and being a lawmaker are two different aspects and two different points to focus on. So we need to consider that the whole totality and not just limit God into this, oh, I love all of you kind of God that you won't find in the Bible. You'll only find that probably in the lost book of the Bible called Second Excrement, chapter 3, verse 15. Like, that's probably the only place you will find that passage. But other than that, I'm unaware of anything in the 66 books of the Bible that says God loves every single individual unconditionally without any sort of request or conditions, because we do see Jesus himself say, you know, repent ye therefore. So we have this whole thing laid out. It's not just, you know, love you unconditionally. It's Jesus saying, repent ye therefore, which that itself can be considered love, and if you're caring about the person's soul. So anyways, let's continue. Any quick comments before we do that, by the way?
Oh boy, I do have a lot, yes, but you're pretty much hit the nail on the head there.
All right, then let's here we go.
When you love someone, you put them first, and if they love you, they do the same back, making your relationship equal and kind. God doesn't ever put his people first. In the Bible, he demands, and he takes in the form of praise and sacrifice, and what he does give is a pittance. He might bless someone to have a child or help someone win a war, but how often do these things come at a terrible price, like with Job or Jephthah? God throws humanity pitiful scraps of his power and then expects extreme levels of devotion for it. Why not cure all cancer or end all the hunger in the world, and then not ask for anything back in return?
Alright, so let's deal with that.
I've seen this argument so many times. Why doesn't God just make everything a utopia?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
God could do anything. Like I said, God could make us not exist, and therefore there wouldn't be any sort of this stuff going on at all. I mean, again, I think that these are questions that we should definitely ask God when we get to heaven, if we are one of those that do get there. I mean, if we have those particular things. It doesn't say we're, to me, this is one of those curiosities that I'm hoping I'd be able to ask. But that being said, let's go, because there was two parts to that. Now, number one was the issue of the doest things that she said is kind of wrong of him to do. My objection and question would be for a Furry Skeptic is what is necessarily the standard? What is necessarily the, if I can think of a proper way of looking at it, by what standard can you declare and consistently condemn something? So, for example, if we look and see that the issue of, as I mentioned to the one person, that if we had rape, how can we condemn rape? And especially taking this argument after reading the Reforming Apologetics book, where it talks about the book of nature kind of argumentation. I think that people by nature know right and wrong, and thus we can examine these certain things, and thus we know by nature right and wrong, including the idea that rape is immoral. But some people don't necessarily think that. In fact, I talked to one person who seemed to suggest that, it is even that thing about rape, that is a subjective thing. So in other words, is it wrong for someone to be raped? Well, it depends who you ask, according to him. So, like, I'm asking you, though, what is it right or wrong? And he's like, well, it's wrong to me, but I can't say that for the other person. And, like, so, again, there's, because, again, I don't know, because, like, I say that, and then I've met TJ Jump, so, because he's an atheist who believes that objective moral values do exist. So I don't know what worldview Furry Skeptic is coming in from. So my question would be that is, what is the standard for you to determine that the things that you have raised as the objections concerning God in these certain things, what is the standard that you say is declared wrong on what he does at that point? And I want to hear your explanation and your justification for that. That being said, trying to remember the other part of it. This is why I need to start taking notes down whenever we do some of these, because my mind's starting to slip at times. But I think ultimately, then, with it comes to you know what? Actually, let's kind of play back the video a bit. I'm just gonna play it over here.
God throws humanity pitiful scraps of his power and then expects extreme levels of devotion for it. Why not cure all cancer or end all the hunger in the world, and then not ask for anything back in return?
There you go. Okay, so that's what I was forgetting to remember. Anyways, so yeah, as I said, when Ave pointed that out, I mean, like, he could have cured it. In some cases, I think there is cure, though it's not big unto it, because I've heard testimonies where some people say, like, the cancer's, like, gone at that point, and certain things, though you have to admit it's a rare thing. So it's not like, oh, this is a thing we can definitely examine quite often, or at least have good written. No, it's not that much recordable, except like a few people that have it, and it's a very, very rare instance. So we can't say and prove that demonstrates that. Therefore, we have some sort of discovery or something like that. And I think he can cure it even through using us. So I think like, and I discussed this and I covered this in the last time that I responded to Furry Skeptic in a video on miracles, and giving God the credit where it's due. When people say, thank God for this, instead of thanking the doctor that did, I believe God is the sovereign ruler of all things. He decrees all things, including the doctor who has helped create the medicine that helps bring about cures, that helps bring about the remedies upon people, that helps bring,
Well, it's not just that. She's basically saying, oh, well, these are some terrible things. Can't God just fix it for us? Sure, God could cure world hunger. God could stop all war. But at that point, would we actually be free if all of those things are just miraculously cured? No, I don't think so. I think that the human experience involves some tribulation. And yes, it is horrific when people do get sick from things, but that is a part of life, and death is the end result.
Yep.
I mean, I'm sorry, but, I don't think that God is obligated to solve all of our problems.
Right, and I would say that I say the same thing. I don't think that he, as someone who is a greater being, a higher being, isn't obligated to solve every single individual problem. So I think that's the thing we have to keep in mind.
Of course, he does interfere when if you have faith. Of course, he does, and he can do that. But it's not like he's going to just completely eradicate something from this world just to make everybody happy. That's not really what the life journey is all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there might be a day when we do discover a cure for cancer, and that's going to be because of people, just God's creation, just doing their thing. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be some miracle that just overwhelms the entire planet one day. That doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alright, so let's see the next portion of the video that's about here.
I don't personally see Jesus' death on the cross as a kindness, but even if I did agree that it was, it is still given at a cost. You can be saved if you accept the sacrifice, and if you follow the rules set down for you. That is the definition of conditional love.
Which, again, I think at that point, if we're going with this concept and this defending, I have no problem with that, because, again, this is the biblical concept here with regards to that we have Jesus here, and he says this, and that those who believe are the ones who, because that's the thing, that even the Bible itself is clearly stated, it wasn't an idea of, everyone's saved, but you must do this. This is why, I think that the passage of John 3:16 can only consistently work in a Calvinistic frame when you understand the text saying, for God so loved the world, or honestly, again, like I said, not like in that particular translation, for God loved the world in this way, as the Holman Christian Standard Bible translates it as, for God loved the world in this way, because that's literally what the Greek puts it as, is for God loved the world as so, for God loves the world in this way.
Could we just take this as a more simplistic manner so people can understand exactly what's going on here? Mm-hmm. Think about, like I said before, the analogy of God being the Father, which he is, as we are all his children. However, if you disappoint your father, let's say you're I don't know, a drug addict, you constantly steal from people, you're in and out of jail, sure, of course your father is still going to love you, as, hopefully he does, but you're still going to be a disappointment. And, maybe you're not going to get your will when he dies. There's something along those lines, right? So, yes, God does love his children, but there are those who disappoint him, and if they completely go against him, I mean, it's not necessarily unreasonable to imagine that God would not be very happy with certain people.
Especially if he is a lawgiver and a judge in that context.
Precisely.
So
yes, love, but yeah.
So and the reason why I was just mentioning the whole thing about the verse is and as I was trying to make sure to explain so it wasn't that much complicated, was the issue that for the concept we're talking about, God loving the world, that he sent his son so that everyone who believes in him. Some people just think that everyone, and then they just stop there, but it's everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. So I just wanted to make that, because I think once someone then starts with that, they then sort of I think that if the person would have gone there, I don't think Furry Skeptic would have necessarily have as much of the doubts or questions that is going on at the moment that was shown in the video. That is not to say that she would have remained Christian or anything like that, but rather that this would at least indicate a variation, a difference in how one goes about approaching certain questions.
A serial killer could still believe in God and yet be like, oh, well, God loves me, so I'm just going to keep on killing. You see, that's not how it works.
Right, and that's why there's the fruit of the Spirit that we read about in Galatians, which I'm going to read in starting in verse 19. The works of... Oh, no, not verse 19. I forgot. That's the one I usually street preach on regarding what sin is. But verse 22 says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts, which, by the way, that's in reference to the particular sins mentioned here in verses 19 through 21. So I don't think there's a problem necessarily with the idea of teaching that you have to, repent. That the idea of teaching repentance and being, good. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, being a good person is certainly a good moral virtue to have.
Or at least acknowledging that you've done some pretty messed up things in your past, and now you want God's forgiveness, and you genuinely believe that you can have that.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering also, is there anything in her video that we can find common ground on and maybe kind of agree with?
I'm hoping that that's what we can try to at least get to, because I think we kind of did with the earlier part where she describes what's not worship, which I would kind of agree with. So I think there's at least that common ground that we've come to, at least. So
yeah, I don't want to be too mean to her, because I understand the.
Do you think you're being mean to her now?
Oh boy, it's gonna get worse.
Well, I mean, do you think you're being mean to her now?
I don't know. Well, I mean, every point she's brought up, we kind of debunked it. So I'm like,
but does that mean you're mean though, Abe?
From her perspective, probably.
I don't know. I would like. I don't know. Hold up. Furry Skeptic, if you happen to be watching this, let Abe know if he was being mean or anything, because I guarantee you he's a sweet doggo. He just innocent. He wouldn't harm a fly, at least to my knowledge. So. So.
No, I just don't. Yeah. What? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Let's just go on.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, so let's continue onward with the video.
And it is by no means a proper parent-child relationship. Furthermore,
all right, so just quick comment there before, because I'm just gonna quickly comment before beginning. She was talking about that conditional love thing. Again, understandable for the issue of the parent-child love thing, but at the same time, keep in mind it's not just that. There's also context of judge and lawmaker, and the person that is a citizen in that place where these laws are placed. and we all have that law in our hearts. We all know what is right and wrong. So when one breaks that law, then we are then subject to the punishment. Just like if someone is in America, they steal something, they are to pay, and they are caught, they have to pay the the fine or do the time that fits that particular crime they did. So just a quick thing I wanted to point out there, that's the other relationship that we must consider.
I always agree with the saying that any being worthy of worship wouldn't ask for it, and any being willing to accept worship isn't worthy of it. This ultimate moral authority God should, when he sees someone who is poor giving their money to the church, correct this, letting them know it's okay not to give. When he sees someone bowing...
So I would kind of agree there, because the issue is that God loves a cheerful giver. That is what the Bible says, and most people that are what you would be describing here, the people that give to money when they can't or unable to really, these people that end up doing so are victims to prosperity gospel preachers like Joel Osteen, or as I call him, Joke Osteen, T.D. Jakes, Creflo Dollar, these kinds of people. And that's why, like, recently Benny Hinn, he used to be a prosperity gospel preacher, and he got out of that business and recognized the absurdity that was being involved in that. Now, of course, I haven't catched up much on what he's doing nowadays. I probably need to, but it's interesting too that you think about that. I haven't seen him on much new TBN lately. I haven't heard about him that much in the news recently, so he's kind of laid low, almost like most of these other Christians like David Platt and others have been doing. Like, you'd have to check their website or anything like that if you ever want to see something. So, but most of these people that you see on a Christian news TV or radio cast are prosperity gospel, false satanic preachers preaching the gospel of the devil. And that's what we get when we see people saying, give your money to me. I even attended a church that basically spent 2 minutes on how to give money to the church and saying that it is a command to do this once a week. I'm like, show me that biblical passage, because you say it's in the Bible, but you didn't say the citation, you didn't say the chapter, you didn't say the book. You did not prove your case, sir. So
when he sees someone bowing their head, he should raise them up, making it clear that their life is a gift and such actions are not necessary.
Not necessary, apparently, but again, because here's the thing, not everyone has to bow their heads, honestly. This is a misconception that I usually see. Like, for example, you're familiar with the parable of the rich man. No, was it rich? No, not the rich man. The tax collector and
Yes.
So both go into the temple to pray, and remember, this guy's a Pharisee, and he's looking up. Now, mind you, his attitude is prideful. But is anywhere condemning the act of looking up? The guy that's in the thing.
No, I kind of just want to like get back to what she's saying, like.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to address, is that the issue that she thinks that we need to, if we see someone that's praying, that's praying down, and that's why I was bringing that up, because the issue is that it's some people do pray up, but then if you look in that parable, the guy is choosing willingly to bow down his head to pray. Now, I don't know why it's wrong to just let them do that if that's their conviction and their feeling in their heart, and that's something they want to do, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but she's also saying that God is demanding people to worship him. Now, her definition, from the get-go of worship is already flawed. She has this very, like I said, pessimistic perspective of it. So it doesn't, like, oh man, like, there's just so much to this. I mean, it's not like God is asking all of us to like, you must worship me now. Like, it's not like that kind of a crazy thing. Like, no, it's just out of respect and adoration and love. It's not like we're forced.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what she thinks. Like, we're forced to do this. No. No one is forced to do anything. You know, it's your own free will. And if you choose not to love or, you know, believe in God, then, yeah, there will be consequences for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's your own decision. And that's why you have to go on the right path.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, but yeah, like I would so like to what she was saying, you know, I would if someone is praying and their heads are down, I mean, I wouldn't interrupt them because that's something that they want to choose to do. I mean, like, let me just put it this way. I personally think, and I think others can sort of, like, with what I see that can be certainly kind of wrong, is certain ways that one is playing a video game or something like that. And I know that there's a better way that's going to, like, guarantee you win something completely. But I want to let that person do their own thing, because they may have a strategy or discover something that I may not. Or it's just a way that they're comfortable playing. And then this doesn't just apply to video games. This can just be a principle in general for all sorts of things, that not everyone is the same. Everyone has their own sort of thing to do. Like, for example, here's the one thing that's with me. I hate when people highlight or draw in books that they have. I like, as soon as I go to the library and I find it's in there, I like cannot stop cringing or keeping composure until I've gone to the next page that doesn't contain that, because I think it does damage to the book and it's a waste, and that therefore, you know, I would want to do and I would say, you know, you don't need to do this, it's all there, it's, you know, it's all. And then if someone, you know, sees me freaking out about that, sure, maybe they can say, you know, kind of chill out on that, but at the same time, I have a reason to do that, and I think that I at least am entitled to my particular way of viewing that. But at the same time, I also have this opinion that I don't think I should necessarily criticize or say, oh, you must do this. Like, if they want to, you know, copy notes in the actual book, or use highlighter in the actual book, let them. Just let them. You know, you do your thing, I do my thing. So if someone wants to pray face with their heads down, let them. What is the problem with just simply a little bit of muscle and emotion that they, or not emotion, but emotion, like they just barely are tilting their head down and they're praying? What's wrong with that? It's no different than if someone just tilts it up a little bit.
Nothing's wrong with that per se, but what she's saying is, I believe she doesn't think that we should respect authority more or less. It's like, well,
that
why should we
particular
place
authority
God above everyone? I mean, she did kind of say that though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, why should we place this deity above everyone? You know, shouldn't we all be equal? Like, what is this?
Well, the thing is that we humans are equal, but God, as she even admits, is a greater being. And if that's the case, it's a greater being. We've just destroyed equality right there from the get-go.
That was the thing I was saying earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, so if you're saying it's a greater being, you have by definition removed equality from the equation at that point. So that's where we need to understand that certainly with human beings, we all are made in the image of God. We all are human beings, and we all feel the same pain. We all feel the same emotions. So, yeah. So let's continue because we don't have much left. We got about 50 seconds.
If this was the God portrayed by Christianity, it still wouldn't have any proof of existence, but at least I could believe Christians who profess that the God they believe in is good.
Alright, there's another two thing. I forgot there was another one. So that's a little more shorter than from what we got.
Worship is just one of those concepts that I personally find rather repugnant. There is an inherent subjugation to it. You are telling yourself that you're not as worthwhile as this other being, and that's just not true. If God exists, you don't have to worship him, and if he doesn't, then you really don't need to. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so let's go over that one more time in the statement that was just made.
Worship is just one of those concepts that I personally find rather repugnant. There is an inherent subjugation to it. You are telling yourself that you're not as worthwhile as this other being, and
well, you have established that it's greater, so there is already sort of thing by your own saying that would be the case, and I think that's
you're not as worthwhile.
Right, I think that's the thing to, I mean, worthwhile, like.
Well, what does that even mean? Like, I
think what she means, because she did technically make one video on this a while back on original sin, and I had been meaning to respond to it, but I had been caught up with so many other things that I had never got to respond to it. But ultimately, it was something like the idea that people are born with a sinful nature and born with all this kind of stuff, that they are sinners in the eyes of God, thinks that that's sort of a kind of harming aspect to view yourself as, to like, because the whole testimony is of God, please forgive me, for I am a sinner, like again in the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, where he's like, forgive me, I'm a sinner. She would basically go up to the sinner, to the tax collector, and kind of, you know, besides saying stop bowing your head down, to also stop saying that stuff and putting himself down in such a way. It's again a confession where he comes at just like a person who is like, forgive me, you know, for being such a horrible racist individual in the past. I have seen the error of my ways, and now I've seen the light where I can see people as bleeding the same blood, that they are no different than me, that we are all equal, and therefore I vowed to get away from racism. So, like, what's wrong with that? If we use that part here, what's wrong with that on the aspect of being a sinner, which by the definition is someone that does wrongful actions? What's wrong with someone and, you know, having that kind of mindset? I mean, that's, if they have this, that means they, you know, no longer see the wicked actions as something to focus on. They want to strive towards holiness. They want to strive for something better. So, you know?
That's just not true. If God exists, you don't have to worship him. And if he doesn't, then you really don't need to.
So, if God exists, you don't have to worship him. If he doesn't, you don't really need to. Or if he
coming from that incorrect definition of what she believes worship is.
So the issue again is that when it comes to worship, whether you see this or not, I mean, I honestly don't think it logically makes sense that that it's not necessary. I think the issue is again with the fact that God is a law giver and a judge. There is requirements he's allowed to make, and therefore put upon certain people that are binding citizens under his legislation, or people that are under, because the way it is a covenant, and people that are under that covenant are in a contract form where they are agreeing to have to do this kind of stuff. So again, if we want to be consistent, we then have to condemn all forms of contracts being done today. We have to condemn all sorts of governmental laws that are being about today. If we say and commit and say, you know, that we're having to force and say that something is wrong, because the question I asked the one atheist in Arkansas, you know, he thinks that it's wrong for us to say that this is right and then this is wrong. And so when asked, then it should be wrong for the judge or the law today to say that it's, wrong to rape, and therefore if you do it, you go to jail. That would be basically enforcing a certain set of morals on something.
Okay, but God's law has not changed since it was written.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's these 10 little things called the commandments.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. All of these things. And it's not like this is some kind of a fluid morality. It's literally the law. I don't really understand the problem with just getting that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so that was the video that we've had. Hopefully this encourages some dialogue from Furry Skeptic, and who knows, maybe if she wants to come on the show in the future, we will be more than welcome to have her to discuss sort of these sorts of things, because that would be the other thing. At that point, we could have 3 furries on the show. That being said, we are now switching topics over, which, wow, we have been talking about that for about an hour. I was not expecting that, honestly. So,
Wow.
Yeah, I guess we covered some ground there. Up next, we will be, there's plans to bring on a guest next week. So that's why I'm saying this now and doing this topic now before we do the whole thing, because along with that is that we got a debate coming up on Thursday, next Thursday, with Deconverted Man on SJ Thomason's channel, on the history of Did Jesus Rise from the Dead? And so we will be covering these topics, going over these issues. So yeah. So if y'all wanna get into that and check it out, go check out SJ Thomason's channel and hit that subscribe button on there, so that way you can be informed for when the debate happens. But it'll be next Thursday. I think the time is 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, but I forget, but I know it'll definitely be before we do this show, which we'll still be doing. And I think our guest for that next one, that we'll be seeing if we can get an interview with him, as well as to discuss the Apocrypha on the show, is a internet legend from the Reformed perspective that's been on the YouTube for quite some time, and he's been doing some debates with Roman Catholics. Is none other than Turretin fan, who is, as you can tell, I think A can already figure this out from reading it. He is a big fan of Francis Turretin. So we're gonna be interviewing and see if we can try to get good old Turretin fan to come on, because he did say that most Thursdays are pretty much like his free days. So that's pretty much a good schedule at that point for any time we wanted to interview, and he does a lot of these kind of things to try to get that. But we'll see if we do that or if we do something different. Like I said, we're still gonna try to work things as to what we're even gonna do at that point. But let's go over the debate. Let's come up with a game plan. So you are a person that is a Christian, correct?
No.
Ooh.
Of course.
So, what do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe this is just a mere blind faith with no evidence, or do you think that you can have some evidence to back up your claim historically?
Yes, I could definitely back this up historically.
What is your historical evidence?
I'm sorry?
What is your historical evidence? You Christians don't have evidence.
I don't know. Perhaps the fact that over 500 disciples literally saw him rise from the dead and walk around the town 3 days later.
Boom, boom.
500 individuals.
500 individuals.
At least, yes.
At least.
Not to mention his tomb was also opened, his body was not there, and people literally saw him walk out of there.
Yeah. And so, part of that is kind of what I am going to get to. The issue is, we have like the 500. Now, why is that interesting is the fact that you have 500 people are mentioned. And if we have that account that is included in the Acts 15 testimony of the 500, who wrote Acts? People have affirmed in the scholars that it was by Luke. And then we have the Gospel of Luke, and in his, he actually starts naming certain people.
Yes, including Paul. But another thing I would like to is a very important thing to consider.
Not in that particular gospel, but I understand what you're getting at.
Oh, no, not that. But the account of Paul, you know what I mean. Another very important thing to consider is that Christianity as a religion itself would not exist if Christ did not rise from the dead.
Oh, yeah.
It just would not have occurred, ever.
Exactly.
Like, there would be no affirmation of a miracle. Like, there would be nothing of the sort if he did not act. And, like, there are historical accounts of this, obviously.
Yeah.
That's why Christianity exists.
In fact, if you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul says that he declares the gospel which he has preached unto them, meaning referring to before the church, the people at Corinth became a church, which also ye have received and wherein ye stand. So meaning this is something they stand upon. In fact, let's use the CSB's translation. You have taken your stand on it. And then verse 2 says, by which you are saved, if you keep in memory what I preached unto you, unless ye have believed in vain. The CSB, unless you believed for no purpose. So what we're seeing from this is that this is the one big foundation, and that if it is not true, then they believe in vain, and that it is the main thing that they have taken their stand on, and that is verse 3 and 4. Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the scriptures. And so we see then he mentions Cephas, which is referring to Simon Peter, because Cephas was one of the names given to him. And it says after that he was seen of above 500 brethren at once. So not only that, it says of above or over 500 people that were brothers and sisters in Christ at once.
At least, yeah.
Of whom the greater part remain unto this present, but some are fallen asleep, which he refers to in this as they have died. And then it even says, after that he was seen of James, then of all the apostles, which this is going to be important later to note, with James here being the brother of Jesus, and of course all the apostles. And last of all, he was seen of me also as one of born at a due time. So this refers to the road to Damascus tour that he did. So we have there the testimony there, and so I want to issue why I'm bringing this up and why I decided to act a little kind of trollish towards Ave there just for a second. So when it comes to this is where we use the New Testament, of course, but people say you can't use the Bible to prove the Bible. Well, here's the thing. Prove to me that the White House is white, but you don't use the White House. Try doing that if you can, to prove that the White House is white, but you can't use the White House to prove that. So you going to it, using pictures, anything like that, you can't do that. You have to use something else to prove that the White House is actually white and not black or blue or purple, so when we use the New Testament, we can at least use it like secular historians do. Like, for example, Bart Ehrman, He is an atheist. He is an agnostic. Author of the book that I have right here in my hand, misquoting Jesus, where he has criticisms against the New Testament, where he thinks there's textual corruptions that makes it a not reliable text. But as a book of history, he references it for the historical Jesus, not just Josephus and Tacitus, but also you can use the New Testament to discover historical facts about individuals. And people say, well, what about the fact that there's miracles mentioned? Well, every other ancient work of antiquity contained miracle accounts in it, including, like, certain people that were considered there was a guy, I forget his name, but he's called the father of history, and he was a great historian, but his thing contained miracle accounts and miracle stories. Should we say that all these...
Socrates?
No, not Socrates. He was a philosophy guy. Herodotus, that was the name.
Ah, yes.
Herodotus contains miracles in his historical writing accounts. But does that mean we therefore dismiss all of Herodotus as fictional historical myth?
But I also think it's rather silly to dismiss, like, literally hundreds of people's accounts of seeing Jesus alive 3 days after his body was buried. Like, you have, like, the appearances, attested by Luke and Paul, all the 12 apostles, John, hell, even, like, women said this, and back then that was, like, a big thing, like, women can't attest to anything. But no, like, hell, even Matthew and John said that.
Yeah.
So it's impossible. Like all of these people, just what, did they all make it up? Different groups of people over the course of the day. Like, did they just? Oh well, I think I saw. I don't know. Like, no, there are literally dozens of accounts of this. So that is a first-hand source right there. And yes, it is in the Bible, but that doesn't mean it's not historically inaccurate.
Right, exactly. And so I think we can use that. And even then, I say this. So here's the case that I've used these statements that we can find within the New Testament, and then there's the different criteria that we try to utilize. The criterion of earliness, which means if a saying is more trustworthy, a saying is more trustworthy if it is reported in early accounts. We have first century accounts of the Gospels. The Gospels are first century documents. And then, if it is... So we have the criterion of multiple independent attestation. It means a statement is likely to go back to Jesus if it is reported in 2 or more independent documents. And then there's the criterion of embarrassment, which refers to sayings pointing to authenticity if they would have embarrassed or caused difficulty for the early church. So these are 3 of the criterion that I utilize for my points. So as was stated, you have the 4 Gospels, you have the statement in 1 Corinthians 15. So 4 Gospels all have a historical resurrection account. 1 Corinthians 15 cites a creed. That's what we see in there from those passages that we read, is a creed that goes back and predates Paul. So at that point, if we go with like Markan priority, for example, but Paul wrote before the Gospel of Mark, then we can get a pretty decent date regarding the whole thing here. That would be probably like, if I'm not mistaken, it's like nearly a decade apart. So like some people say it was like 47 or 57 for the Gospel of Mark, I think, or somewhere within that time period. And if that's the case, then we then have at least it predating it by nearly a decade. And if 1 Corinthians nearly predates that by a decade, then imagine what time this creed in 1 Corinthians 15, what its dating could be. So already we have the attestation of it by multiple sources, by Paul in that thing, and then apparently the fact that it's a pre-Christian creed, and that it's very early in dating compared to the event in which it is said to have taken place in AD 33. That being said, then, we also have the issue of the Q source. You ever heard of Q besides in 007 films, Ave?
I have not. Oh, wait. Q as in, like, a menagerie of individuals?
Q as in the letter.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. I was thinking too deep into it. No, I have not, actually.
No, that's good, man. But, like, yeah, Q is a thing in source criticism for the New Testament, with where they get the word Q from. It comes from the German word QL, which means source. And it's basically a hypothetical source that exists, or that we don't know if it truly exists or not. All we can tell is for those who hold to the two-source hypothesis of the synoptic gospel problem, they'll say that Mark came first, and that Mark used writings from Q, and then Matthew and Luke would share these sort of sayings. So there's these pre-Markan or pre-gospel Q sayings is what we have, quote unquote. So basically, if you see similarities in the Gospels of certain stories, they would start attributing these to certain hypothetical source documents. And so, if we go with this theory and the scholarly work that has been done to try to attribute something as a saying from that time, Burton Mack is one scholar who actually points out a Q saying that we can see, according to the scholars, that what would be found in this Gospel of Q, or this Q document, would be similar what we read in Luke chapter 11 verse 16 and 29. And what exactly are those passages? I'm going to go ahead and pull those up on the screen and read them to y'all. Luke chapter 11 verse 6. Keep in mind, these are said to predate the entirety of the Gospels that are in first century in the 4 Gospels that we have. So what do we have here? I see Slam RN says, you do not read the chats, do you? I do read the chats. I'm just trying to mostly focus on the show when we're getting certain things. So let's see here. Luke chapter 11 verse 16. So it says, others tempting him sought of a sign from heaven. So right there we have that, and that's part of the context, but we keep reading to verse 29. And when the people were gathered thick together, he began to say, this is an evil generation, they seek a sign, and there shall be no sign, or there shall no sign be given it, but the sign of Jonas. All the people that are early church and all that attest that this is trying to point in a Jewish understanding of looking forward to a resurrection prophecy that is coming, because the sign of Jonah, the prophet, if you read Jonah, there's there was being in the belly of the whale, and that's usually when Jesus says that, just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale, so too shall the Son of Man raise for 3 days and 3 nights, because he talks about that Jonah was in the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. So too, after 3 days and 3 nights, the Son of Man shall be resurrected. So we can.
No, but Jonah didn't die, though.
Right, exactly. No, but
the only precedent for a resurrection in Judaism is at the end of the world.
Well, not just that, but there was the prophecy that would be laid out about a resurrected Messiah, because that's what he's pointing out here, is that there's a sign of Jonas the prophet, which he talks about, where he goes into the story and everything, and then there's the issue of where he says elsewhere that that just as it was for Jonah to be in the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, in 3 days and 3 nights, he's mostly focusing on the time at that point, not the location of where they would be or if they're alive or dead, but the time that he gives. But then after that he says, in 3 days and 3 nights, the Son of Man, which is a versus Son of God, Jesus referred to himself more often as the Son of Man. So he says the Son of Man will raise after that. And so we can tell, obviously, what is meant here by this. And so if this is in the Q source, at that point, I think it's pretty safe to say another proof of early attestation. And according to Patrick Harton in James and the Q sayings of Jesus, he dates the Gospel of Q to at least 50 AD, which is even before the composition of 1 Corinthians. So again, we've gone over 1 Corinthians, the fact that all these sayings can be traced back to an early period of time, but then we have the part that I think Ave might be curious about, if he's not heard of this or not, the criterion of embarrassment, which is pretty much like if it's an embarrassing story to have, which a lot of people may try to say is like, well, that doesn't seem embarrassing to me. Well, it's about what's embarrassing at that culture. Because, for example, let me ask you, if a woman were to come out and say that she has experienced something crazy, like something that's like interesting, like for example, like say a deer just ran across the yard, would you believe that woman?
If a woman said a deer ran across her yard?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, for some people that wouldn't be
possible.
Well, so for some people that wouldn't be the account, especially if we're talking about the issue of certain crimes that have been committed. For example,
oh my goodness.
In Josephus' Antiquities, we read of a context. And remember, this is a guy that's writing about the context of what's going on during the time of Jesus, because Josephus was slightly around 1st century, but is mostly 2nd century from when we get. And in his Antiquities of the Jews, he writes, Book 4, Chapter 8, Section 15, "Let not the testimony of women be admitted on account of the levity and boldness of their sex."
Exactly. And who was it who first saw the tomb opened? It was a woman.
All of them were women. And not just that, you can see this mindset that Josephus mentions if you go to Luke chapter 24, verse 11, where it says, "And their words," referring to the women's words, "seemed to them as idle tales, and they believed them not." So, to the male disciples, they're like thinking it's just idle fairy tales. They're just, they didn't even believe them.
And then, of course, the male disciples ended up seeing him actually, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, well, I guess we were wrong."
So if even other disciples are doubting them, and you're trying to supposedly make this stuff up,
you can't. You really can't.
Yeah, why would you put that there? Why would you put that as a story if, like, especially saying that that's the women are the one that found it, and you're going to go around telling people about this, especially if a good portion that turns out to this is a Jewish population. Why then do you use this narrative if it is not true, and you're trying to explain it as so? And not only that, if it's not true, how come a majority ends up joining, or I wouldn't say majority, but let's say a big number of people end up joining the church? And we have testimony of this, not just of what the Acts says, where it says, like, if I'm not mistaken, 3,000 people joined the church after one particular sermon that he gave, because it was a time where a lot of people were in that area due to certain festivals and festivities. But the fact that...
Yeah, it's almost like this was an actual historical thing that occurred, and when people started to see that, they started to believe.
Exactly.
Weird, right?
Right, and it wasn't necessarily the fact that it was the resurrection that they witnessed, because some of these people, like I said, are just visiting, but they hear about this stuff, they see the conviction, and not just that, but some of these people weren't willing to die for this. So if someone made something up, they would say, "Oh, you know what? I made it up. These people were not only people who actually did witness this, but were convinced in what they had saw was true, to the point that they were willing to die what was going on.
Right, and also think about back in the day, like the times we're talking about, lying and blasphemy and these types of things. Your word was much more powerful than it is today. People lie about all kinds of stuff today, but back then it was much more important to tell the truth. Lying and treachery was a very big deal. So if you were caught lying or making things up, you could literally be killed.
Yep.
People don't do that.
Yeah. So. Hey, wait, what was that? I know. Well, I'm not being possessed. You are. What's up? Okay. So so going to another incident is the fact that there's the resurrected Jesus accounts where the disciples don't even recognize who he is.
Yeah, well, they thought he was dead, and now they're like, "What the heck?"
Yeah.
I'd be a little flabbergasted too.
Yeah, especially like one of those that didn't recognize him was Peter, the one who is said to be the rock on who Jesus built his church upon. So like, where's that's one thing you definitely would find embarrassing, is if that, like, your main figures, especially these big people that are influential, they can't even recognize the person they've been following their lives. If they didn't and there was or whatever, like, wouldn't they be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't put that in there to make this more convincing? No, they were straight up honest with the whole thing and wanted to even put such an embarrassing detail there, because there's the other thing, would be embarrassing in that time and culture at that point. So we can't try to say like, well, that doesn't seem embarrassing for me. Like, not yet, to you it's not, but like if you go to other places, there's cultures that have different sort of social ideas of things. Like, for example, a thing today could consider, what is it, it's customary in, I think it was England or something, I forget what it is of the video I saw, but you have to drink, if you get like soup, you have to finish your whole bowl or whatever, because it's considered like a compliment to these people. But in another country, if you do that, that means you're questioning their it's a sign of you question their customary values or whatever, their hospitality. So that must mean they must do better. So they may bring you another bowl of soup or some other food to try to please you, to think that they can do better. There's ways that people take certain things differently. And so, same thing for ancient.
Well, no, just also consider the fact that when Jesus, did arise from the dead and was walking around, he was very battered. He was bloody. His injuries were still very visible. So, of course, people that knew him as a lively individual, now they're seeing him all, tortured and decrepit. Of course, they would be like, what the heck happened? Obviously, they literally witnessed his crucifixion, but yes, I forget what the verse was, but he was still bleeding from his hands as he met people, as he was walking around afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's, of course, the crown of thorns and all that. Yeah, I'm sure he was not looking in the best of shape after that.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, I'm just
no less alive though.
Oh yeah. So those are some examples. Those are some examples of how we go about handling it, and that's just a little brief kind of a sneak peek at what's going to be happening. So I recommend checking out the debate when it happens for more of that. By the way, Ave, have you seen this thing going on Twitter about this thing called #TheNewGuy?
I have not.
So apparently this whole thing happened where, what is it? There was a comic that was done after PewDiePie had been robbed, or had his house broken into and all that. And someone made a comic where it showed this like girl that had been there for quite some time at this workplace or whatever, and she's looking at something and laughing, and there's a guy, this big giant guy that's called, just has on his thing, the new guy, and he's like asking, you know, what are you laughing at? And it says like, you know, don't you think that, or he's asking, you know, what are you laughing at? And she says it's some millionaire just got his house robbed into, which was at the time, and people made the connections that it was referring to PewDiePie, and the new guy says, don't, that's not funny. Don't, what would you say, you know, kind of say or respond if that would have happened to you? And then she says, you know what? I think we're gonna be great friends here as working employees. And he says, really? And followed by, no, not really. As if that was what he said was something we should vilify and think that that's wrong, to see that, oh no, we have to agree that it's good that PewDiePie got robbed. We shouldn't.
Why? Why is it good if somebody gets robbed? That's terrible.
Well, because of the whole controversy with PewDiePie that happened in the past and blah 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 blah. So, anyways, someone now has taken something that, and note, this has barely been the year of 2020, but already people have taken this concept and are turning it positive. And that's why if you go on Twitter and you look it up, people have taken the comic and have turned it into a positive thing, even saying, you know, don't go and harassing and filling up the comments of this chick with like negativity and all that. They took the comic and did basically a parody account, or took a parody thing where they would do it in a positive light. Like, for example, one person did this thing, was like, you know, I think we're going to be really good friends here, and says, really? And then the next one's like, yes, I absolutely love it when people, you know, provide constructive criticism that helps benefit others, if it provides negativity. So thank you for doing this. So like that, and then like it shows, you know, still treats her, sees her as like a villain, but because the new guy has like this kind of positive attitude, he still tries to befriend her, and it shows that they then get along and all that. It's just like, I can't get enough of this stuff. Like, it is amazing, like how positive that this whole thing is regarding the new guy stuff. Like, they've taken something that was supposed to be negative, and they've turned it into a positive, where it's now, you know, either that everyone's friends again. And like, here's the best one I've seen: the new guy, he loves you even if you don't love him. Like, this is a person that wants to make people happy and, you know, filled with joy regardless of who they are. So like, there's a lot of good things that have come about from this particular epidemic online, and I think people, you know, need to follow the example of the people that have decided to turn it into positivity. Stop the negativity, stop with the hatefulness, and become that which is positive. Now, definitely doesn't sound like too much of a theological thing to some people, but I think, you know, if we're going around and we show the love of Christ in a similar way, I think that could be done. I mean, I don't know. Overall, what do you think of this whole thing, Ave?
Yep. What do you really think of the whole thing? I was literally telling you. I mean, it's good that they made a positive thing out of something very negative, but
I just liked how you were like, yeah, it's like, dude, you really need me to explain further? Is like that
right? Like, you already said everything. I mean, I guess I could make the example of when Hillary Clinton called all of Trump's supporters deplorables, and then we kind of just ran with it and was like, yep, deplorable, you know, make a positive thing out of negative. But, you know, that's a good thing when that happens.
But I think the difference here between that is, like, it's... Because I can understand, like, I've used to have insults hurled at me, and I would just kind of, you know, run with it. But this is more like, they don't simply roll with it. They take it and sort of alter the narrative, not into a satire where it's comes back, it's just like antagonizing against the other person, but rather it's, if I had to think of it similar, it's what I've seen from Foxler occasionally when it came to the dog patch and the Dio situation. Like, people there was the depictions of them beating up Foxler and all these other people, and then how he responds. Now, again, I don't condone every single thing that Foxler does or says, but I can appreciate that he takes the time to when he responds to it. He talks about love and peace. Like, this guy is compared to them, this guy is like a pure hippie. Like, this is a guy I can honestly see as a flower child during the time when the soldiers had the guns, and he's that guy that's putting the flower inside the barrel of the gun. Yeah. Like, this is that kind of guy.
Made that image of her like punching him, and then he made an image of them hugging. Like, in response to that. So
was it hugging, or was it them drinking and sharing a milkshake together?
That was them hugging. It was just a cute little hug, that's all.
Yeah, because I remember it was the Dog Patch Press one. They were hugging.
Yeah, there was a few others.
Because, like I said, that's the thing. He did that with a lot of them, and I'm like, dude, that's a hippie right there. That's peace. That's showing that if anything's someone's turning something negative, they kind of chill out and make it like, okay, well, still, that's kind of the thing. He was like the new guy in that aspect with that one picture. Like, he'll still love people regardless if they hate him. Now, granted, there are some things I can understand with why they might not like Foxler 4, but that's another topic altogether. I've already had part of that discussion with him a while back on here in regards to the issue of morality and how we come to defining morals. But that being said, yeah, wow, we're like almost hit a 2-hour mark on this episode today. How do you feel about that, Abe?
Oh, I think we covered a lot today. My goodness.
Like, it's like burning more extra calories in a vocal workout, exercise, jazzercise kind of thing.
Sure.
What does that even mean? I just now thought about that, jazzercise. What is that? The only time I've really heard it is from the Grinch that Jim Carrey did.
It sounds like something from the 80s, like you're on this medicine ball and you're listening to like this weird music as you have like your leggings on. I don't know, like that's just the image I get.
From what the very first image I see that pops up is like them old workout videos where everyone's wearing the one-piece little workout gear. It's the
like a leotard.
Yeah, like the leotard things. All it's missing is Richard Simmons is there. Hi, everybody.
Oh my goodness.
There you go. So, well, we definitely had a lot just done with this episode today. So we're playing the music to help close us out. So definitely epic as usual is our friend Ave. Ave, any last words you would like to say to our audience before we let the music play us out?
Well, wow, this was quite an experience. I would also like to further discuss things with Furry Skeptic, but yeah, that's pretty much all. I hope everyone enjoyed the first episode of 2020, and there shall be more to come this whole year.
Oh yeah, better believe that. Now, like I said, we don't know the future for next week's episode. We may or may not have Turton Fan on. We'll see about that. If we have any other things that maybe Abe wants to discuss, that'll be, again, he is a co-host. He has what to say what we do with the show as well. You know what I'm saying? Dear goodness, I just went Adam Sandler for a second, like Bobby Boucher, anyway, seriousness. Thank y'all all for tuning in. But we're gonna let the music play out at this point. So thank y'all for tuning in. This has been RC Apologist. Y'all take care.